Wow, it sounds like the Bronx Zoo in this control room. I don't know. Yeah, there's the birds.
That was a turkey.
Right. And then there's you. Okay. Hi, I'm Steve Gillmor. This is the Gillmor Gang for Friday of some month and some year. We've got a great tech week to jump into, so let's do it with our guests, gang members. First, from New York, John Borthwick. Welcome, John.
Hey, Steve.
Thanks for joining us. In an undisclosed location, John Taschek. Welcome, John. I didn't hear you.
Top of the fridge.
Did you block yourself? Your audio, John?
No, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Okay, that's better.
Okay.
Okay. In Palo Alto, I think, Keith Teare.
Actually, in Mountain View now. We just moved into new offices.
Oh, nice.
Oh, very nice.
And that last voice is Kevin Marks in San Jose. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi there. Good to see you again.
So let's get right to it. Do we care about Facebook Home, John Borthwick?
Yeah. I mean, I care. I care about it a lot. I mean, I think that I think in 2012 we saw Google started to eat the Apple stack through the apps, right? And now what we've got Facebook starting to eat and commoditize the Google stack. I mean, I was surprised after the Kindle Fire launched. I was surprised that nobody else got into that business. So I'm kind of surprised it's taken this long. And I know that what Facebook Home is it's not as fundamental as the Kindle Fire, but I think that what you're seeing likely the part of the reason why Rubin sort of moved out of the Android role over Google, because the platform over there I think is far more vulnerable to. You've got Samsung coming at it with the S4 and a lot of software in the S4, and you've got Facebook coming at it from the top, and you've got people like Amazon who are going to reskin the OS and deliver a product that doesn't say Google anywhere.
Keith here, what do you think?
I'm a little bit biased because I look at it through the prism of my own company, just me. So that's a caveat I'm sure your listeners will filter out. But the way I think of it is Facebook is a kind of an old-fashioned network architecture that's extended its walled garden into mobile through this move. It's kind of a hub and spoke network, a bit like an old mainframe architecture. And mobile's this new platform which is much more peer-to-peer, much more grid-like, as we all use voice and email and text to talk to each other across the phone network. Facebook is kind of cut out of the loop. And they're trying to extend their architecture to mobile through Facebook Home. I actually think it's very nicely designed. I think it has no more privacy issues than Facebook already has, so I don't really buy that there's a new privacy issue here. I think it's functionally quite useful. I think putting the person in the center is primarily a marketing positioning for Facebook, because what they're really doing is putting Facebook in the center. But it's good positioning. People want to be in the center. And I think that when we launch Just Me on the 17th of April at Demo Mobile, it's going to be compared to Facebook Home, and people are going to ask the question whether the address book on the phone is the true center for the person, or whether the Facebook cloud is the true center for the person. And that's good for me. So I both like it and see it as a competitor at the same time.
Kevin Marks, what do you think?
I think it's interesting. As John said, this is something that we've been expecting to see for quite a while. I read a blog post predicting this kind of thing a couple of years ago, precisely because Android has two components to it. It has the open source component, which is being used all over the place, not just for the Kindles, but in all kinds of devices, including video game platforms and so on. And it has another piece, which is the with Google piece, which is all the Google apps. And what we've seen since then is those two pieces have got more separate. The Google apps, Google is now taking that app suite and putting that on the iPhone as well. I suspect if some other platform picks up enough share, they would do that too. Though I wouldn't hold out hope for Windows. And what we're also seeing is other companies are building alternatives to the Google thing on top of it onto the underlying Android stack, and Facebook is another example of this. And what they've done is very clever, because they've in some ways it's not that different from what some of the phone companies have done, replacing some of the Chrome aspects of Android. But Facebook has this huge advantage, is that everybody already has Facebook installed on their phone, and most of them have Messenger too, because they presented stats showing that something like 20% of mobile phone use was using Facebook apps or Facebook in the browser. So that is definitely a significant usage for the phone, and that gives them an advantage in building a home screen that will actually have something on it that makes sense. The slightly more insidious thing is that this is them taking control of all the notifications on the phone, bringing theirs front and central. I suspect the next phase of this will be further encouraging of developers to call Facebook logins and to feed events back into the Facebook stream, so they can then show up on the front page of the phone before you unlock it, rather than having to unlock it and then scroll down from the top to see them.
Okay, so insidious. So how does that work? And who is insidious? It sounds like Android is insidious for allowing that.
No, not at all. Android is flexible, and Facebook is saying,
flexible.
We've come up with and Google is going to have to respond to this. They have come up with a better way of doing a certain set of notifications, assuming that your life revolves around Facebook. For the set of people that does, they'll like this. For those of us who are more on other things like Twitter and email and things like that, we'll find this thing annoying and we won't install it and we won't buy those phones. But it's not really aimed at us. It is aimed at the large number of people who buy the phone that their phone company makes available to them when their contract is up, and this will be a very attractive option in the shop when they go in there and they compare what that looks like with the other ones. Assuming that you can actually, it will only look actually attractive. It was a slightly funny thing when we watched the demo. It only looks actually attractive if it's your friends who are showing up on the front screen rather than some bunch of random Facebook dudes, which is what we got with the demo. But like all these social things, they make sense once it's your friends. It's the same problem Twitter had, which is, why would I want to know what random people are reading for lunch? Well, you don't, but you want to know who the people you're interested in are reading for lunch.
Well, I'm not sure I want to know anything at all about random Facebook dudes. It sounds like a rock group. John Taschek, what do you think?
Well, I don't know. It's and part of me thinks that what they talked about and announced is going to be, the perception is going to be a little bit different when people actually start using it, and it's less insidious than they think. But clearly this is a shot at both Google and probably Apple, because it's definitely Google, because I think it started with Andreessen. Facebook is eating the web message, and they're just taking that to the next iteration, and they're going to use Google's own weapons that they have and take it over. I mean, they're going to have this whole thing. They're eating the web, and they're eating the web on the phones that are provided by their future competitor, if not current competitor. And on the Apple side,
sorry,
what's that?
No, I was going to say, I think that's a good way of looking at it. The eating the web bit and then eating the phone. You could think of it as, a home is a house. Then there's a prison, and the difference is the prison has walls and maybe a small garden, and you can't get out. And this is the extension of the walled garden to a new platform. And if users buy it, Facebook gets to own the whole experience.
This is the same argument that I just don't understand, which is that somehow people are being forced to download apps and install them, and then become imprisoned by them. I mean,
not forced, but
you have to pay $99 to do this today.
It's a voluntary prison. It's not. It's a voluntary prison, but it's still
rehab.
It's attempting to re-encapsulate content that exists inside somebody's environment, and to replace the outside world as if it doesn't exist. It's like that movie, I forget the name of the movie, where they go to the end of the world and then they figure out it's paper and there is actually another world outside of it. What's that movie?
I think it's called the NBC Nightly News.
Another Earth type thing? I don't know. But I know what you're talking about. I think there was a Twilight Zone about that. But I'm just looking at this from a business perspective, that, Google can monetize mobile. They've shown they can do that. Facebook is monetizing mobile in a bigger way and has been ever since. And now they can do it even more. It's just purely that. And why not? Why wouldn't they do it? There's a cheap operating system out there that's used by over 1 billion people, and they can get the penetration of their 1 billion users on it, probably everywhere except for China. And they'll be the.
They can get the next 4 billion as well, which is very much their goal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just pure business, and it's kind of genius. The only, the downside is that there's no actual downside unless Facebook becomes less important, and there's always a chance of that because people can shift off it, or people talk about their lunch too much, it becomes more irrelevant. But generally, I think this is going to be a new platform style for getting right onto mobile. Facebook will be a platform for development, and apps developers would develop for Facebook and then have it automatically distributed on all these phones automatically. It's a very compelling story, and why wouldn't anyone do that?
Yeah, I agree. It's very compelling. I think that. Well, I have more to say about it, but I want to get John Borthwick. You want to sort of jump back in after what everybody has said?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to take it in a different direction, which is there in 2013, if you're a large platform player like Facebook, do you need to be in the hardware business?
No.
So the different direction is, in other words, that is the play here. I mean, some people suggest that that this is just a holding action while they actually do build their own OS.
I mean, I think these guys have, for years been convinced that they're an app, and for years a desktop app, and now a mobile app, and then they fragmented their mobile apps, into several different apps, and now I think that at the pace at which things are changing, and changing at the platform level, changing individual apps and innovation at the app level, but from independent app to providers, but also changing from other platform providers. I think that I think this is a first step to a Facebook phone.
I disagree. I think this is they see themselves as a platform, not as a set of apps. And this is their way of moving their platform into another arena and interpenetrating the OS so that they replace bits of it. And they've said several times they don't need to make a phone. They want to be on all the phones. So they're very happy that HTC is willing to make this thing, and AT&T is going to put it on their front page, and they'll sell a lot of them. But that isn't going to reach that many people. It'll reach 10 million people, and they've already got over 200 million with the apps running on their phones.
I think the HTC phone that they're going to come out with will probably be like a prototype for what they plan on doing, like tighter. And you won't be able to uninstall it, perhaps. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't really know much about it. I do know that HTC needs a competitive advantage. They have a deal with Microsoft. They have a deal with Facebook now, right? They're looking for some differentiation there, and Facebook gives them that opportunity. But I totally agree with Kevin that they think of themselves as an app in order to get the platform services out there. I mean, that's what they're going to be. They're going to be a gigantic data company, and they're going to have a lot of data, and they're going to be a platform for serving up that data. And I think they've talked about that in the past, but I could be imagining it because most people still use the app. But it is a series of services that are, and I think that series of services is the future. Everything is driven down into the plumbing.
So I see it a little bit differently. I see it as one step forwards, two steps backwards. The one step forward is that we're moving beyond the world of single feature apps. Apps that let you share a picture, or apps that let you do group messages, or apps that let you do social video, we're moving to platforms that allow users to do lots of things that they would want to get done. And this is a great example of integrated software that combines a whole number of different user goals in a single platform.
Can you compare that to the Apple? Apple's kind of discrete apps, you know?
Yes. Apple is way more primitive compared to this, and I certainly, because of my hat, I approve of apps that are trying to be platforms and do more than a single feature, and I think that's a great direction. The 2 steps backwards is that I don't want users to let Facebook get away with this, because the phones themselves don't lock the user into anything, but have all the functionality to provide these kind of services without a single vendor basically making you join their club in order to take advantage of those kind of services. And with the address book on the phone as the center of a user's gravity, I think you can build all of these services and be just as good, if not better than Facebook, with a 1.5 billion audience today on both iOS and Android, growing rapidly over the next few years, as an open version of what Facebook's trying to do. So the 2 steps back is the mainframe kind of hub and spoke network architecture that we have to buy into to get that functionality, as opposed to a more distributed network architecture where every node, every cell phone, if you like, every address book is an equal in a distributed network.
What did Zuckerberg actually say about the plans? I read not a transcript of what he said, but more along the lines of an analysis of it. But what did he say around this? I mean, it sounded like he was both good and bad at the same time when he was discussing it, which means when he's like that, it means that he's holding something back. He's sandbagging, as we would say in the past.
There's a URL which has his opening vision statement in it that I got sent to me this morning. I'll put it in the chat room. And basically, he's making the point that an app-centric world is not a user-centric world. That users don't have a device in order to use apps. They have a device in order to get stuff done. And apps, especially many apps, are a really bad way of doing that from any kind of productivity point of view.
He's attacking Apple then.
Yeah.
Certainly. Yeah.
So he's basically saying we're going to flip it around. We're going to put people on front, and the apps are going to be contained inside our shell. So you can still use apps, but it's really all about who you know and what you want to get done with them. And I think that's smart. I agree with that. That's what Just Me is doing as well. Although we're not subordinating apps, we are an app, but we really, all the rest of it is what we're doing as well. And I think that is where the world's going to go. So I like that. And I think they can get away with it in the absence of there being an alternative on Android. They cannot do it on iOS because Apple won't let them build a replacement shell.
Right.
So on iOS, they have to be an app. And so, honestly, I wish I'd have thought of being a shell on Android, and I could present Just.me that way. I think there's a lot of insight there, and if they can pull it off, it's awesome. But whether they get away with it or not, I think the world is moving to a relationship-centric world where whether it's your colleagues or your family or your friends, it doesn't really matter. You just need the tools to do what you need to get done with them.
Well, it's not only that. It's not just the people. I think we've already processed that and synthesized that and determined some of the outcomes of it, even though it's in its infancy. But it's an apps-related world, how the apps are related to each other. That's coming together. And
they're going to block that. They're going to block that.
Who's going to block what?
Facebook will not block that. Facebook will try to own all that.
Who's going to block what?
I think Facebook is going to try to be effectively what Windows 3.1 was. They're going to try to put as much functionality as you need, as many times of the day as possible, into their own, let's call it an OS, because that's really what it is.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think that's probably what they're doing.
Okay, well, I think this is a small part of a much bigger story that's going on, which is John Borthwick on Monday or Tuesday, you retweeted tweeted a story by Eric Schoenfeld about Twitter and their cards and the capability of being able to deep link into iOS apps. You want to describe that why did you tweet that? Why did you think that was important?
Yeah, so I think it's important because another piece of the app puzzle. Let me hold the mic up. I think that helps. Another piece of the app puzzle that I think is sorely broken is discovery and distribution for app developers. And so I think that Twitter's proven over the last 3-4 years as the sort of the rise of the app world. Twitter's become an incredibly powerful tool for people sharing objects within apps. In other words, the media objects that come out of apps. But since they disabled that feature, I think about 3 years ago, which showed in the primary stream, the source of the client, there hasn't been a very effective way for distribution. And so I think this is smart on Twitter's behalf. It's good for them. It's good for app developers. It's generally just a very good thing. And I think the evolution, Twitter cards are great. We've done a bunch of things with them here at BetaWorks. They work great and they are great. They need more development and they need more help. And this, I think, it only accelerates that.
Right. So what I think it means is, at an Uber level, it's the merging of the app internet, as George Colony calls it, and the web. I think because if you can deep link into an app, you can deep link out of an app into a web page or any other address on the internet, which means that the kinds of things that Salesforce is doing in terms of objects, empowering them with social capabilities, the ability to follow an event or an object or etc., is now being extended to one of the major players. So
I think that, Steve, the only thing I would add to that is that I think that the linking structure of the web is still it's a step in that direction. It is, Twitter's done all they can, but there's some big architectural steps that need to be solved still.
Yes,
right?
but I think this will trigger that.
And Google does a much better job of this. I mean, if you are clicking from a web page on an iOS device, then moving to the App Store and downloading is very easy. But if you're in a web browser on a desktop, there's no sort of app it later sort of functionality. In Google's case, there is, right? Google Play has nice functionality where you click on an app and then you store it, and it shows up immediately on your phone.
Yeah. I think that the aspect of the technology that allows you to download the app, if it's not already on your machine, that's a one-time install. But at a much broader level, the ability to deep link into content inside of an app essentially makes it seamlessly available in the same way that the URL does on the web. And as such, it allows...
Which is the point. The point is that Android has had that from the beginning, and iOS has lacked it, and Twitter is trying to catch up with that.
And my larger point about Facebook and what they're doing is I have to think about whether I want to go out and get an Android phone now. And so far, I'll wait, because I think what's going to happen with the Facebook strategy is that it is going to it's a brilliant strategy for all the reasons you said. I think it's a direct attack on Apple much more than it is on Google. I think they're just using Google as a sort of a slide along, like somebody grabbing onto the bumper of a truck and skateboarding down the highway.
Well, they're trying to take away the ad revenue. Just migrate some of it over to Facebook. They don't need all of it. They just need to show growth.
Well, I think it's a brilliant strategy for a number of reasons that you all have delineated. But I also think that once people start to be able to develop inter-app technologies, the ability to be able to orchestrate a series of processes on different apps within one system, which then tie, as Kevin's pointing out, to the Android universe, that we have essentially a linking up of all the major players. It's also something that Microsoft can do with their technology.
See, I think there's another trend going on. I'm not really sure which of these trends ends up being the dominant trend and which one ends up being trailing trends. But The other trend that's going on is there's a huge reportalization or an attempt to control audience. Twitter is doing it.
Yes.
Facebook is doing it. Google has to do it.
Well, the ad model does this, right, Keith?
Right. Yes,
this has
but
been driven by monetization.
yeah, but Apple is not doing it. Interesting enough, Apple is not in that game
Because they have a different business model, right?
Right,
I mean, it's
right.
like, I mean, look at Tumblr. I was amazed this week. I mean, we're doing some good things with Dig, but there was a report which came out from BuzzFeed on traffic on Dig, and we've doubled the traffic again on Dig, which is great. But I leave my own stuff alone. One of the data points that they referred to in the BuzzFeed article that blew me away is they said that Dig, which is still small, very small, is pushing more refer traffic than Tumblr. And I'll tweet out the link. It was remarkable. And so you could see that there are these networks. I mean, Tumblr is, by its design, David has built a wonderfully, closed, it's totally open to the web, but it's this wonderfully crafted closed network. And now you've got Twitter trying to do the same thing and Facebook trying to do the same thing, and it works for the ad model.
And you can open a browser window from a URL within your app as well, which
Right.
means the whole web's available, including any ads that might be in the web, including other people's ads, by the way. So it isn't necessarily destructive, that trend, but I think the ownership of the audience trend pulls against the let's link to each other's apps trend. And more, I think there's a containment of the web inside
But
your app.
it always pulls against that. That's par for the course. That's business as usual. What I'm saying is that there are many reasons. There are people that want. I mean, God, look at the people who are, like Kevin, who are huge web fans. If it's open standards, it's good. Yay, rah. Okay, there are people that, like myself, that want to be able to have the things that I enjoy across the devices that I use. I don't like being an Apple bigot to the exclusion of Google. In fact, I think the Nexus 7 is fantastic. I can't wait for this Facebook thing to emerge in a couple of months on the on
Facebook thing with new technology.
That's right, exactly. That that innovator Zuckerman,
Some buckets.
Zuckerberg, the innovator, the inventor of the Model T.
No, I think you're right. But there's we've talked about this before, and no one outside of music circles, except for maybe Kevin, seems to know about this technology called Audio Bus, which takes the two different apps that are they're music apps, but it enables them to be shared, right? So you can share the bus across this audio bus. It's pretty fantastic if you think about combining that much processing power and sharing application data. Now, Apple can certainly do something like that with apps, and they can turn on that switch when they need to. But I still think it's far more productive to do it the other way currently, which is to have a more open sharing model for applications and data. It's more the Kevin way, but that's maybe because I'm used to it. I'm open to anything that works. But as far as productivity goes, you just want things to happen. You want to at a very fast rate. I'm not so much into the rich environment yet, but just for productivity, I think it's just a lot easier to get those.
We've got some stuff coming. I think it's it's certainly been announced. Chatterbox inside of Chatter. This is like a rich technology in the middle of what has been historically a web-based technology, which is now moving to the mobile world. The mobile world, by definition, is rich. It's rich in its sensors that understand who you are, where you are, what you've been doing, how your heart is pumping. On every level, it's a rich container. The fact that for business reasons, Apple and other companies have constrained the services to native and hybrid and so-called HTML5 is just the reality of how business works. It's not the definition of how a service is going to work and whether or not it's going to be useful.
Well, I think
I
you're
see all
absolutely
sorts
right.
of services on the Nexus 7, for example, that I would give my eye teeth for on iOS. But I want both. I don't want just one. I don't want the Facebook services, which are based on magical algorithms that I will never be able to influence.
Right. Well, the challenge is that the iOS model encourages you to specify exactly which app you're linking to, because of the way they build the links. And so someone else would have to be the broker. Twitter could potentially be a broker there, but they're not installed enough of it to be able to do that. Whereas on Android, you're linking to a kind of thing, and then you get a set of apps that can handle that kind of thing. You get to choose between them to decide which one handles it.
Right. So you get this insidious behavior that you decry based on that openness. So what I'm trying to say is that...
But it's the other way around too. So Google has the opportunity to take over the iOS phone because they can build their apps and then build links between them that only go to their apps and don't go back to the native apps. So use that against Apple. So they can make Google apps go to the Chrome browser.
For that period of time. But does it really matter in the long run? I mean, Adam Bosworth, I think, I don't know when he said this, but when he was back at Microsoft maybe 10 years ago, I don't know when he said it, but he made the point that Moore's Law trumps these kinds of decisions that are made on the behalf of efficiency. In other words, you can have the world's worst pile of spaghetti code, but if you've got a processor that hammers it down so that to the user it feels instantaneous, game over. I mean, this is how Windows proliferated and profited, is because they basically built the hairball up at the rate of consumption of Intel's services to the point where they could get away with it.
Yeah, well, there's a good parallel. There's a good parallel. Sorry.
Go ahead, John.
My point was that was a short-term game because the spaghetti code eventually led to proliferation of spaghetti code, which and spaghetti on top of spaghetti was. I'm
not applauding spaghetti code. I'm saying that the processor speed erases the economic momentum of more efficient technologies. I mean, how many assembly programmers are there today?
But the point is that disruption works the other way around as well. So the reason Apple went with the roots of WebKit and that browser was they were building a much more efficient browser because they were aiming it at smaller, lighter devices that could draw as much power as the bigger
Absolutely.
ones. And they were aiming that forward. And that meant that was able to take over market share from the things that were the spaghetti code because they were more efficient.
Well, but
and Google's motivation for the Blink fork of WebKit this week was the same thing. If you read Alex's post about that, he said, basically, we're sick of dealing with all the cruft that's attached to building this on a bunch of different places.
Well, you need to unpack this. I did actually read a whole bunch of stuff about this because I figured that we would actually get to this point, but you're going to have to explain it. But before you do, the thing that I think is interesting about nobody at the Facebook announcement was talking about what the battery is going to do on these Android phones. They're already paperweights in their original incarnation because of the big size of the screen, etc. I mean,
that's not true. Mine lasts 2 days.
Of course, it's not true. That's why I said it.
I mean, come on.
Exactly. So I've hit a nerve
here. The battery
here.
lasts a couple days. I mean, it's not an iPad, but I mean, it's doing stuff all the time.
We need something that sounds like Android that implies fanboy. What?
But that was the Phil Schillerism. They're only making their screens bigger so they can put bigger batteries in to keep up with our battery life.
Exactly.
No, they're making the screens bigger because people like big screens, Phil.
It's the coolest thing that Phil Schiller has ever said. Right then.
It's hilarious.
But my point is that nobody is talking about the fact that the Facebook Home strategy is going to kill batteries faster and more efficiently than any other app or OS in history. I mean, with all these people flying around the screen, insisting on chatting with you while you're trying to
I
read
have
the
this app
latest.
called Scope, which is an Android app, and it's constantly pulling. It's the biggest user I have. It doesn't use up. I mean, the battery usage is probably 15% of the total phone, because you can look at that stuff on an Android, and it still won't evaporate the battery life in a day. Facebook won't be any worse than that because Scope is doing the same thing.
And that's why all I ever see now when I'm looking at tech press is stuff about batteries, Moby, etc. What's your Moby? How big is your Moby?
Well, as you know, I was one of the first to buy one of those.
That's right, John. You're way ahead. That's
I thought it was Mophie, not Moby.
It probably
Moby
is.
was the DJ, right? That created music by combining.
Yes.
Okay,
Anyway.
but does anybody want to understand my basic premise, which is that Moore's law and it's what has come after that in terms of bandwidth and etc. is going to erase the difficulty of the ability to be able to support these technologies that we are talking about.
Yeah, I don't see that as a problem that needs.
It's an ephemeral problem.
How far are we away from the Star Trek captain's log, star date, whatever, and your whole life gets put in the cloud, and then you choose after the fact what to do with it and who to share it with. And
well, according to Scoble, it's just when are the Google Glass going to be released?
Yeah, but it's coming. Put it that way. We all agree it's coming. Whether we agree it's coming through your glasses or some other part of your anatomy is another question, but it's coming. And bandwidth and battery life and all of those things we all assume will be solved along the way. But the key thing is to understand milestone jumps. I mean, it feels to me as if we're at that moment where Windows 3.1 moved from the Calc app, the Notepad app, the messaging app. Do you remember all those little apps you got in Windows 3.1, the Paint app?
Yeah.
We're moving from the time when there was these single-use apps on an OS that was ahead of its time but hadn't yet developed the software infrastructure to realize its full potential. We're at that moment with mobile, and this Facebook announcement is worthy of praise because it takes us to a software world which is richer and more complex than the single app, single use world that we've just emerged from. I love that. I think that's awesome. And I think in that world, Google, actually, I disagree with you, Steve. I think Google is going to be more threatened than Apple. I think Google will be threatened because Google Plus is not yet feature-rich enough or discriminating enough in terms of its features to support the user's needs across a wide range of things in the same way that Facebook is.
John Borthwick, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with parts of it. I mean, I think I was amazed when he said Google Plus because I thought he was going to say Google Now or Google Android. I haven't thought about Google Plus in maybe 6 months. But I agree with the gist of what he's saying. I mean, I think that the Windows 3.1 analogy is a good one. I mean, I think that we're at a point of extreme flux right now. I think that you could look at the Facebook announcement also as being very thin, right? I mean, you could look at it as being partially defensive and thin. It's sort of like, I mean, you remember how quickly Poke sort of came and went, right? I mean, I think this is more important than that, but I also think this is this feels like this was that they scrambled to put this together, and that it was partially reactive versus, sort of a lot of planning and a lot of foresight. But there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think this company.
What are they reacting to? Are they anticipating something coming out? Do they know something?
I mean, I think that I mentioned at the beginning the S4, and I think that you're starting to see the hardware guys really get into the software business, and that commoditization train that I talked about at the outset, I think is strong and powerful. I think that Facebook has a great hack culture, and I think that my hunch or guess would be is that somebody hacked this together and they said, what the fuck, we should try this, because they need to change. I think that they knew they needed to change the game. I don't think they care about battery life, right? reinforcing Steve's theory about Moore's law. I mean, I think that they're just going to drive it harder and harder. And but I do think that the S4 and some of the software that's on there, and admittedly I haven't played with one yet, but I'm very excited about some of the things that Samsung's starting to do there. And it's Samsung that's doing it, not Google.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. The Samsung with its record profit that came out yesterday, the day before. I mean, a large part of that was their innovation across their industries. Of course, it's a gigantic company, but a large part of that was mobile. And I think the S4 is the phone that people are going to look at as at least the alternative in the United States to the iPhone, and probably be the bigger seller around the world. It'll be a very interesting phone, and the form factor is going to be, the form factor alone will be a test of battery life, since it's larger screen size and higher density pixel resolution. So I mean, it'll be interesting.
What John said about Google Plus is kind of interesting, because when I think about user-centric, which is what Facebook really put on the agenda yesterday, and I look at what Google's got to offer, they have the Google contact list, which is effectively the address book on an Android phone. They do have Google Now, which kind of feeds off stuff that's in the cloud. But Google Plus is really their only integrated, capture, share, send, discuss software. They don't really have anything that comes close to Facebook's functionality outside of Google Plus. And if you were Google, wouldn't you think that if this Facebook thing takes off, then the number of searches happening on an Android phone against the Google search engine is going to decline massively? So you've got to get into that user-centric play somehow. And what is your asset? Is it the cloud-based Google contact list on Gmail? Is it the address book on the phone? Are they the same thing? Does it matter? What are the services you build around that, and how do you present them to the user? I would have thought Google Plus is their bet, and that's why Bradley Horowitz is running it, and that's why Gundotra spends so much time on Google Plus. Whereas Google Now just seems like a small, promising but small feature right now, and it doesn't seem to leverage any of those other things.
Yeah, I think that's right, Keith. But I also think that, you've got the platform players who are, they're aggressively innovating in some areas, but they're also aggressively ripping stuff off, right? I mean, it's the Facebook announcement. Some credit, I think, was given. I didn't hear the whole video, but I think Zuckerberg gave some credit to Path and others. Is that correct? Anybody know?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't think he mentioned Path.
But I think that there's
Path was at the
Path's the Twitter event.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there's but I do think that there's clearly 3 or 4 companies, Path, Highlight. I don't know. We can put together the list right now, but maybe parts of just me. It's like there's a lot of pieces that you can see appearing in Facebook Home that we've seen elsewhere. So I think it's I am. What am I saying? I don't think that Google Plus has taken hold yet, and I actually think that they've got to do something radically different there.
I agree with you. That in a way, that's my point.
I just think that and I think that they're, I'm sure if you look at the data from inside of Google, it looks like it's huge, but it's just not. I haven't seen anybody in the last 6 months use it in any context that I care about for social sharing online. Period. It's just maybe there's one post I looked at. It's just like it's.
John Taschek, what do you think?
I had to go off mute. I'm sorry. I think I agree with John.
So this is just defensive and not
Oh no,
offensive?
he said it's partially defensive and still early. The what the fuck attitude is permeates. But I don't think that's the defensive nature of Facebook. To have that, the WTF part is more of the offensive, like take the risk. I really think this is this is well thought out, but not yet. So the strategy is well thought out. The tactics have not been well thought out yet. So tactically, it looks like, oh, we're just going to put a couple of apps together on a phone, and I think that's different than the longer term strategy. So I think they're putting something out there. They're taking a risk, and later a more fully formed strategy will emerge.
Well, the thing I got from I watched the live, announcement, and I watched it on my Mini, by the way, and I put it up on the big screen with AirPlay, by the way. So,
By the way, what are you for?
What I'm suggesting is that that this is a direct assault on Apple. That's what I felt during the announcement. I just felt it was a challenge to Apple that I didn't expect necessarily that a Google Plus type play would in fact come from Facebook on top of Google's infrastructure. I thought that was really interesting.
Well, they are moving. If you think about iMessage, Steve, iMessage is probably, if you combine iMessage, PhotoStream, iCloud, email, you probably get close to what this is, but in 4 different apps. And I think Apple's DNA holds it back from really integrating some of
I
those
don't
things.
agree with you, Keith. I don't think it holds you back because notifications are the unification of that. When I consume all those different messages, I consume them through notifications. So to me, it's not 4 different apps. It's one app.
Right. But that's the point. That's exactly what the piece that Facebook's trying to do. They basically picked up Steve's viewpoint here and said, okay, notifications are it, and we need to make notifications the heart of our app.
That's correct. And what they did, though, in terms of the graphics, the presentation, is they went after Apple. It looks like an Apple environment.
It looks like the Apple screensaver, exactly, yeah. When you leave your Mac on, it starts doing that with your photos.
And it creates the illusion that if you get a $99 phone on the 12th, that you're basically going to be able to have the best of both worlds. Of course, that's an illusion, and iOS is an equal illusion to that fact. The way they roll with iMessage, that they roll SMS and their own proprietary format in.
Yeah, now that's that. I mean, in other ways, it's also the BlackBerry play, which is be the message bus and integrate everything with one UI.
Yeah, well, good luck with the BlackBerry play.
But that was why people bought Blackberries, because it let you deal with multiple texts and emails and everything with the same user experience. The people I know who loved Blackberries that was their big thing. It was the same sort of unified notification user experience thing going on there. What Facebook is saying, we can make that nicer because we can actually attach people's faces to it, and we have people's faces, and you don't. Haha. And that, the Android tries to put people's faces in notifications, but a whole bunch of people who email you don't have their faces. You just get a generic little grey icon thing that's like crap, and that is an issue.
So just briefly, because you brought it up before, Kevin, explain what's happening with WebKit and Blink and the sort of, well, if you take that out, I'm going to take you out kind of stuff.
So it's what's happened is that Google has said going forward they're going to not be building on Web Core anymore, which is basically WebKit is the Apple open source project, Apple originated open source project that powers the browser, Safari, and the browsers on iOS, and Google adopted it for Chrome and for Android, and they've now said they're going to fork off from it, strip out all the stuff that's specific to other platforms, so they can just keep building their piece, so they can iterate faster. So initially, that means that we won't see much change, but it means over time that we may get a bit more divergence between the two. Now, there's already a lot of divergence within WebKit because there's a lot of conditional compilation. Safari and Chrome are not the same thing; they don't have all the same features.
Okay, now we're getting a little too deep here. I'm trying to get a little less.
No, I think it's a good thing though. I think what Kevin may not have said this time or last time, because I didn't listen last time, is Google is taking a different approach because they want to go multi-core, right? They want to go multi-processor on the kit, and that is going to allow all these apps to tie together in a better way, in that kind of open but walled garden approach that Google has, and that's why they're doing it. They're going to push this web as far as possible. It may be the equivalent of John Brown against the machine.
Yeah, they're going to catch up. They're going to catch up to a rich app, by hook or by crook.
That's right.
And also Mozilla and Samsung are working together on a separate multi-core project to replace their browser too. So that's that's
but right
underway
now
too.
it's Opera and Google.
This
together,
is good news
right?
for diversity. I mean, it's good news that we will now have 3 open source browsers competing to implement standards well. That's good.
And
I
Kevin,
think
are they all going to contribute
that's
back
really
to the
terrible,
core?
because I just remember Netscape, Internet Explorer, Opera. What was that one, that open source testing kit that we used to?
Gecko.
Gecko. No, that was the engine, but it was called. It started with an A. Anyway, so you'd have to test on this one to see if your code was would work. And then you'd run it on different browsers. I mean, it was part of the shit we have to do at Ziff Davis in the labs to see if your code ran.
Right, but the point is, we've actually fixed that problem with the HTML5 project.
Now it's going to fork again.
No, it's not, because it's now specified how they behave.
It was always specified how they behave.
The name of the show, by the way.
It absolutely did not.
The name of the
show
show
is... It did not
is
specify it clearly enough at all. The name of the show is what?
Fork Off.
Well, I've already got forking, spooning, and knifing. But so what the HTML5 stuff specifies now in great detail how you handle everything, and the browsers converge on it, and there are a set of test suites for that, and everyone's contributing to the test suites. So that layer is actually way better than it was with the old browser wars, where it was we're adding arbitrary feature X here, we're adding this other one here with a different syntax, and the groups are actually converging in the standards bodies on the features that
why does
as they
every
implement them.
company have to have a test lab for a browser? Why do all these people write their code on the Internet Explorer and then can't get off it? There's something wrong. I mean, and if there's multiple versions,
and they can get off it now.
The new mountain of spaghetti, but it's just on the browser.
But we fixed that. We're not trapped in Internet Explorer land anymore.
We're trapped into app land now.
We're not. We've now got Microsoft putting up a site saying, "Please enable please use standards so that it will work on IE. Don't write just for Apple."
Go back in time when you could run something on Lynx and Netscape. They both worked. It looked ugly, but they both worked. And they started forking. They got a little more rich. The company started getting bigger. They started investing in more, and one took over, and then people wrote to it. The same thing's going to happen again. It's history repeating itself.
No.
Who cares about the standards? They never cared about them to begin with.
But now they do.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't. This big story of this week is about bumper surfing, on Android. I mean, who's next? They're going to, just because they're going around in a circle doing it to each other doesn't mean that they're not doing it.
Right, and at the same time, the web platform is getting more coherent and compatible and making sense. That is the
it makes sense when you have the choice of a browser and you can choose to do different things on it. Now, if you look at what Chrome is doing, just look at what Chrome's doing, right? I have a ton of Chrome apps. They're written on Chrome, right? I don't know how to get those anywhere else, so I stick with Chrome. Is there some spec that shows me how to move my Chrome
You mean Chrome
apps
extensions?
forward? Yeah, extension and apps. They're Chrome apps.
Well, the Chrome app's just web pages. You can open those and other things. They work.
But as people like Facebook, create Uber apps that allow people to plug their apps into it, they're all going to get some stickiness out of that, and all it's going to do is to harden the silos that they're in. It's not going to do anything else. It's not going to destroy them. And I mean, the idea that this is going to dissolve in fragmentation, John Taschek, I'm not sure I agree with. I'm sensing that we are going to be running out of time shortly, so I want to leave this as an argument for next week, since it will probably be an argument for every week. And and go around the table, and you don't need to summarize so much as if there's something that you forgot to mention, bring it up now, and we'll start with Keith.
I just want to thank Mark Zuckerberg for changing the discourse around what is the appropriate thing to do on a smartphone, because it's going to help me considerably.
John Taschek.
Every company has to test their software on a web browser, and they have to test it on each web browser. Why is that? If there's all standard.
Keith. John Borthwick.
One of the Brits, right?
That's what I was thinking.
It's
Give
the
me
one
a
thing that
Brit.
I can. Yeah.
Give me a Brit, damn it.
Two Johns,
So-
two Brits is confusing.
Yeah, so I want to see what happens next, because I think this is a piece of the puzzle that's that's starting to emerge. I think that I'm fascinated to see what next steps by Twitter. I'm fascinated to see where Amazon goes with some of this. I want to see, what Apple does next. I'm glad you're happy with your Mini and with AirPlay, but we've got to see some stuff out of Apple soon, and I think we will, right? So I think I think there's going to be an Apple cable TV box, and I'm intrigued to see that. And then I would love, Steve, on future shows, if we could go around the table and also talk a little bit about some of the new hardware we're all seeing, because I think that there's so much interesting sort of unipurpose hardware we're beginning to see pop up. That fits around these ecosystems, whether it's sort of navigational devices for your phones or for your desktop, or for or hardware that's embedded in anything, sensors and all the stuff we were sort of alluding to. But I'd love to talk about that more, but it's not for this show. So,
Well, I just want to remind you that I don't have any control over any of your microphones. So if you decide that you want to say something.
yeah, I just thought of that.
Okay. All right. So I'll take that as applause for my open standards format here. Irony alert. Okay. Kevin Marks.
So the thing that I think is important that has changed is that the browsers are now deploying very rapidly changes as the spec evolves. Android was the holdout on this. That was a real problem, but now we've got Chrome on Android as the mainstream browser. That is being fixed there too, and we've now means that as we add improvements to these standards, they can actually get out to people very, very quickly. So I made the point about SVG, displacing Flash last week or the week before. We're going to see the same thing with the video features of HTML5, the stuff that's building up WebRTC showing up. That dropped on mainline Chrome for Android today. It's already in the other mobile, starting to show up in the mobile browsers, which means that we'll be able to do some of the audio video stuff that you have to use apps for now with the browser. That is going to get interesting.
Okay. I was very excited about the Facebook announcements because as a Apple fanboy, I had the beginning of rumblings of fear. And that usually means that something is interesting that is about to happen. I don't think that the Facebook announcements were it, but I do think, as Keith Teare says, that the going back toward paying attention to a user model, I think, is very interesting right now. I think that social is now so deeply embedded across both consumer and enterprise spaces that when people start to realize their ability to be able to take advantage of and prosper based on their social awareness, that the fears that have been stated on the show about getting locked into one particular plan or another are going to fade and will be replaced with a notion that notifications are the new United Nations, or they're where this is going to be mediated into a broader fabric of operating systems. We're not getting one operating system. We're getting a federated operating system model. I think that's what we're seeing the beginning of here. I want to thank Rackspace, and particularly Rob Legess, without which the show would not be back. I want to thank NewTek and their TriCaster for helping us with the video side. I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor. I want to thank, somebody's calling me, and I'm not going to answer. I want to thank our guests, John Borthwick in New York.
Pleasure, Steve.
Thank you. John Taschek in undisclosed location.
Music Studio West.
All right. Keith Teare.
Thank you.
And Kevin Marks.
Thank you.
Congratulations to Hugh on his wedding, which is where Scoble is today. And we'll see you again next time. Thanks again, and keep listening.